In this video, I'm going to teach you the process of gridding. You can use this to take a complex image, say a photograph that you've taken, and do a drawing of it that is maybe more realistic than you feel like you could do by just drawing it freehand alone. Or you can also use this method to take something small and enlarge it. So if I wanted to do a much bigger image of this or a mural, I could do that using gridding. So the key is that you are going to have a grid that you either draw onto or place over the original image, and then you're going to make a matching grid on whatever surface you're going to draw this onto. So in this case, I'm just doing a one-to-one transfer, just a basic drawing. If you wanted to do this, say as a mural, you would enlarge your grid on the larger surface. So if this were 1 inch grid, let's say, and you wanted to make it double the size, you would have a piece of paper double the size and have your gridding squares be 2 inches. Okay, so first thing we've got to do is get our grid onto our paper. So I have these sheets for you that I've made that have a grid on this clear acetate film, and we can just place that over our image. But I have to make the matching grid on the paper. So I've got my paper, and it matches my original image. If your paper doesn't match exactly, you have to make sure that your grid on the paper still matches exactly, and your image would be within that space that you've gridded. All right. So, easiest way to do this that I've found is to take this piece of paper with my existing grid, and I'm going to line it up carefully with the edges of my piece of paper. And you can see that this grid that's printed on here doesn't go quite to the edges, but I'm going to choose an edge where it's close, and then I'm going to make my marks like so. So I'm just going to extend those forward. Okay, I've adjusted this so hopefully you can see it a little bit better. So just extending from here, and I'm just going to continue doing that. So I have marks that are as accurate as possible to the original grid. I'm going to make these very light, so I'm working with a light pencil, like a standard number 2 pencil or an HB drawing pencil. So just very, very light. And I'm going to do the same thing on the opposite side of the page. And you want to make sure that you line your paper up exactly the way you did at the bottom. So if it is slightly off, if your grid sheet and your paper are slightly different, you want to make sure that you've lined them up the same way at both the top and the bottom. All right. Then you can either use a straight edge like a ruler, or in this case, I'm just going to use the edge of my sheet of plastic kind of as a ruler, and I'm just going to go over this, or draw right up to this edge and draw this straight line in between the 2 marks that I've made. So you could do this by measuring everything out, but if you mess up your measurements and don't get them exact, then your grid won't be exact, and then it doesn't work perfectly. So if you can take some of that human error out of it a little bit, it's just going to be easier. All right, at this point, you kind of get the basic idea. You can feel free to fast forward the video, or maybe I'll just pause it and you'll catch me at the next step. Okay, so I've got my lines drawn going one direction. They're very light. That's intentional. Sorry if they're a little hard to see in the video, but you do want to make yours very light as well. Okay, so I want to make sure that I have this, again, lined up really well, and I'm going to now do the other side. I want to make sure that I don't change the orientation. Okay, lining it up, making your light marks that are in line with your plastic grid sheet, and making sure this stays with the same orientation since my grid is not even. Going all the way around. I've got a little more on one side, a little less on the other in terms of these partial grid lines on the sides. Okay. And then coming down, same thing again on the bottom. Again, make sure you line that up the same way that you did at the top. And make those little marks as precise as you can. All right, and then when I connect them, again, you want to just make them as precise as you can. I don't know that using my plastic sheet here as my straight edge is ideal, so you may want to get a ruler or something that's a little more substantial, but no matter what you use, again, just make sure you're making these grid lines nice and light. All right, and I'm going to check and make sure that that I'm doing this in the way that makes sense, that it's oriented just like it is in my actual grid here. Okay. I'm going to keep going and finish this off camera while you do the same. So just connecting the grid lines. Okay, so again, we've jumped forward in time. I've finished my grid. If there are little places where you need to erase and fix it, I've got my little handheld pencil top eraser. I like to hold it in my hand because the whole point of using this for my purposes in drawing is that I want to make sure that I can get a lot of detail. And this way too, you're not wearing out your eraser as fast. Okay, so you want to make sure at this point that how you've done your grid matches up with your plastic grid. So if you have it like turned the wrong way, or you have your piece of paper turned the wrong way, make sure that you rotate these so that they match. All right, and what we're really going to put our plastic grid sheet on is not, of course, a white sheet of paper, but we're going to put it over whatever image it is that we want to copy. Okay, and to make sure it's not constantly moving around, I recommend taping this down when you have that where you want this. So I'm going to go ahead and tape this down. So I'm using some blue tape, some painter's tape that's going to release more easily than other kinds of tape. So make sure you're using the kind of tape that's going to release without tearing your paper. Maybe you need more than one to make that secure, and if so, you might tape more sides. Before I tape any more sides though, I'm going to label my grid. So the whole idea of this is that I'm going to transfer or draw whatever I see in this square with the corresponding square on my paper. So I think that would be, let's say, ooh, I lost it already. So if I want to do this square, then I'd have to count down 1, 2, 3, make sure I count over the right number. That can get a little bit confusing. So to keep it a little bit easier, you can label these the same way that you would on, say, a map. So you might see this same method on a map. So I can do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And it's just a little bitty one. And, oh, do I have this turned the wrong way? After all of that, oh, after all of that cautioning you guys not to turn these the wrong way, I think I have turned mine the wrong way. So let's fix that. Okay, so I had to flip it and turn it, but now I've got it lined up so that this matches, and that column matches, and this column matches. All right, so now I'm going to go ahead, got to re-secure this. Okay, and then I'm going to do the ones going the other direction with letters to hopefully keep it a little bit clearer. So, and I'm making these really light, so again, you may have trouble seeing them in the video, but all I'm doing is A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, J, K. So we don't want these to show on the final drawing, so we're going to make them really light. Same thing with the grid. In our final drawing, we'll erase our grid. So I'm going to go ahead and I guess here I could have done that as A, but I didn't, so that's like column 0 or column nothing. Okay, so I'm going to just lift this up a little bit, and I'm going to do my letters here to match. Oops. If you are having a hard time getting those to match up, you could draw little hatch marks and hopefully get those to match up where you're putting your letters. So they don't have to match up with exactly where you put the letter, as long as they're in the right column. Okay, so I think we've got everything in the right column, and I'm going to do the same thing going this way. So I did from top to bottom. Oops. Okay. Maybe I'll just turn it this way. So I'll have to figure out what my numbers mean. Reading them the wrong direction, but I think I can hack it. Okay. All right. And now the process is, again, about transferring. So I've got over here, I don't have too much going on in this very top row, but I do have a little bit of this. And then I can match that up. So 1 with H. And so when I find that down here, then I'm going to draw this. So you're going to be looking at how big is this in comparison to this grid square? Where is it? So in your mind, you might even break this down further and kind of think, okay, if this is the halfway point, you know, where is this? Okay, so I've located where I think this is, and I've drawn this in. This is pretty low on here, so I'm trying to get the angle, and I can adjust that as needed. All right, so you kind of get the basic idea. It might not be perfect right away, but we can always go back and make changes. So the grid will kind of let you know pretty quickly if you're going off and getting things wrong. So then I'm going to look and see, okay, where does that little part continue? Does something like that. And then it meets this top edge of the face. So I can look and see, okay, that's maybe also about halfway or a little bit more, and it comes across. Maybe it does something like this. And then I've got sort of this oval eye shape. And then where does that eye shape end? Okay, maybe it ends a little bit more than halfway across this gridded space, which is going to be a little bit hard for you to see in the video, but you'll just have to trust me that it's a little bit further than halfway across this square. So I want to try to get that to match up. Oh, but this part goes a little bit lower, so I'll have to bring that down more. and then I just see a little bit of a teeny part down there. While I'm at it, we don't just have the shape of the insect, but we also have the shadow. So the other thing that gridding this does is it kind of makes it a little easier maybe to look at things as just the elements that they are. So the shadow is just this, shaded in shape. It's just as relevant and just as simple or difficult to draw as the rest of this when you're gridding. So I've got this shadow shape, just kind of try to copy what I see within this little square. And then going into the next square, I think, okay, how much does this shadow go into the next square? Maybe something like this. Again, make sure to keep all of your lines really light, especially the shadow lines, because shadows are not going to have a hard edge. We learned about soft edges. So you're going to have to make sure to erase that edge and just replace it with this soft edge later. All right, so I'm going to keep that going on. I'm just going to do one more square, and then that should get you the basic idea, and you can take it from there and see how this method works for you. All right, so I've got this kind of shape to the face. Maybe I even just want to draw this sort of a general shape first and kind of think, okay, again, that's about halfway. And then I've got this eye bulge here. How high does that go up? So I can use this kind of idea of, oh, I don't have to get every single thing in here exactly perfect and detailed all at once. I can get this general shape and then go back in and sort of add these ups and downs and bulges and whatnot as I go. And then I've got this little antennae, and it is pretty little. I probably would have drawn that a little bit longer if I weren't gridding. So there you have it. So you're going to keep going. At some point you're going to make mistakes and things aren't going to line up the way they should between these different squares. And that's just your cue to figure out where things went wrong, erase, make changes. And that's really how the grid is designed to work, to help you keep everything in proportion on the big scale, because you have these details at least in the right place. All right, good luck. Remember, for this first go round, you want to draw pretty lightly so that then you can go back and make changes easily. I guess the one thing I'll add before I sign off here is don't forget about these interior details too. So, and in fact, I'll add a few of those to kind of make this point. And if you see something here that looks like a line and maybe you don't, because you're kind of far away, but zooming in, you can see these little lines. So they are kind of like lines, but they're also kind of like shapes. So I would then, when I'm drawing them, want to try to emulate that by making it not just a line. I'm going to move this over because I'm realizing, oh, I don't have enough room for that little shape, and then also the space around the little shape there. So I'm kind of making that kind of an outlined shape. And I could keep going with that. So yeah, I'm noticing here, so this is a good example of noticing the negative space in the sense that it's the space around that line I was trying to draw. And I realized, oh, I don't have enough room around that. So a lot of these interior details and lines and edges, those can actually give a lot of clues to making this look realistic in 3D. That can even include something like this, where we see this highlight in here. Again, if you don't get all of this on the first go round, don't worry. Working kind of big picture and then adding in small details, that could be really effective. All right, happy drawing!